Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of STR Success. I'm Dave Menapace, president of the Five Star Co-host, and I'm here with Mr. Will Van Wickler, New England's #1 short-term rental real estate agent. Will, how's it going, brother?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We were just talking offline. Excited to go skiing this weekend. Might be one of the last good ski weekends of till 2025. Who knows? It's been a funny year, a little bit of an interesting year on the weather front, but I'm good, man. I'm excited. Um, why don't we share what we're going to talk about today? You want to hit it
Yeah,
off?
market update. I know I love doing these with you every quarter. It's like a highlight of the
Yeah,
quarter because it reminds me,
yeah,
oh my gosh, we're moving our way through the year. So it's crazy to think about it. We're
totally.
already halfway through March and
Yeah,
25% through the year. And we wanted to talk about everything industry
we'll see.
related, from booking trends to the real estate market to
Hmm.
interest rates to what we're seeing through the platforms, and we're going to talk
Totally.
about it today.
Right here. Boom. I love it. And we're going to hit, doesn't matter if it's a beach market, mountain market, we are going to, our expertise is across New England. So we'll sort of stick to that. Won't pretend to know something we don't know. But, what's interesting is usually what's happening in one area is generally speaking happening in other areas. So I think folks will relate. Why don't we talk about just general bookings and what I'm seeing on that front? We'll kind of intertwine that with buying and selling and all that sort of stuff. And I'd like to sprinkle a little co-hosting stuff in there too.
Let's do it.
Yeah, definitely. So, for my co-hosting friends, folks that are building property management companies, what I will say is that spring and fall tend to be usually the time frames that more action is happening in terms of buying and selling these vacation rental homes, just because peak seasons are in the summer and in the winter, generally speaking. It's usually a good time to see transitions in property management too. So, a little pro tip out there for folks that are in the co hosting space: keep your eyes and ears open. This is usually when people are starting to think about switching their management solution that they have in place. And for folks that are doing consulting, likewise, this is generally when somebody might make the decision to go into self-management and off of property management. So a lot of different opportunities for folks, both for owners as well as for vendors. Um, Booking trends, what I will say is I have gotten a crap load of bookings over the last few weeks, like two, actually over the last week specifically, kind of correlates when people are getting their tax returns and bonuses. So, when we saw those really big lead times over COVID of 90, 120, 180, 270 days, it's much shorter now, even for the summer. So my people with beach markets, Cape Cod, Southern Maine, all those types of places, now is really when you start getting bookings is what I'm finding. So hopefully you weren't stressing out the last few months and just dropping your prices. That would have been inappropriate action in my opinion. We're getting close to $20,000 worth of bookings a day right now. Like, actually probably more, just like consistently things are starting to book up. So if you're an owner who has a co-host that's managing for you, don't put too much pressure on them just yet. Let them hold the higher prices over the pretty much between now and the end of April is when you're really going to start to see your summer calendar book up. And if it hasn't, don't stress. Then you can start to adjust your pricing to try and pull in bookings at different points of the summer. So that's the beach markets. In the mountain markets, what's really interesting is right now, so let's talk about Sunday River, Sugarloaf, North Conway area, some of those. I'm still seeing summer bookings very, very slow, meaning 5% or less of occupancy. So that is normal and that is okay. Those are going to come later. You'll start to see them, I think, in the May timeframe. Now, here's what I'm starting to see though, and we've talked about this before, Will. The middle class is going away, man. Like the really, really nice properties are definitely getting booked. They're getting booked in advance. They're getting booked at high rates. But you have got to keep investing in your property. This is a moving target. This is not a set it and forget it, right? And I do think that until you're like the #1 property in a market, which let's face it, there's always new players coming around, you have to continue to think about investing in design, different amenities. I do find that if in the summer for these mountain markets, keeping people there longer is the name of the game. How do you do that? Well, usually the guest avatar has kids. I've been saying this for a couple of years and I'm driving it home now. Have something like a badass swing set or jungle gym or activities outside, things that would be above and beyond what people would have at home. It's super, super important. And honestly, people make decisions based on emotion, not based on numbers. And I'm telling you, get those amenities in there, get ahead of it, right? Once Airbnb has a checkbox for it on the, in my opinion, on the amenities list, other people have already caught on. So don't worry about pickleball courts up in the mountains. Worry about things for kids to do that are going to keep them engaged and keep them happy. And you do that, you're going to be just fine as we start to head into what's unfortunately a very early spring up there. But it should be a pretty successful summer. All indications are pointing to that. Warm weather is never a bad thing. So, starting to, that's what I'm observing, anyways. That's why I'm starting to prepare for at the house I own up in the up in the mountains in the summer. Those houses are all crushing it. The beach markets, they're so concentrated into a short season of really end of June through like the first week of September that those are booking just fine. Um, as long as you have a good pricing strategy and know what you're doing there, I think you're going to be all right. The last thing I'll say is I am finding more and more folks turning to a more boutique style property manager slash co-host off of even self-management and off of property management. I think a lot of that is because to really compete and dial in your pricing and understand the amenities you need and everything that goes with that, you have to really have someone that's doing this full time and has a dedicated team that can track those things and track the changes in the OTAs like Airbnb and VRBO. We don't really deal with Booking.com up in the Northeast, I find too often, but I'm finding that boutique property managers seem to be pulling ahead. So when you go onto AirDNA and you look at the top properties, generally the properties that are showing up there are either owner managers that own several that have really like dedicated their time and honed their craft, or smaller boutique co-hosts that are in a lot of these sort of national masterminds and they're completely nailing it and building a team to support that. So that's what I'm seeing on the booking and the co-hosting side, Mr. Will. What are you seeing on the buy and sell side?
Yeah, and before I start boring everybody with that, I think what we've seen more in the last, quarter really is than I've ever seen before. Is a lot of people blaming markets and
Ah, I love it. Yeah.
complaining that places aren't investable anymore or they're not good investments anymore. And I think you and I have both seen it's just really people not doing the right stuff. It's
Mhm.
not that they made a bad investment, it's just they maybe didn't invest in design like we always talk about. Or maybe there's a catastrophic weather event that was once in 1,000 years. That's what we saw
Right.
up in the Sunday River Market, where there was an insane flood that has never happened before. It's out of everyone's
Right.
control. But again, I
Happened in
saw past
Sugarloaf too.
clients of mine. Yeah, Sugarloaf got hammered.
Yeah.
Vermont's gotten hammered too,
Right.
with rain and flooding. But we saw clients, mutual clients of ours still crushing it, and it's because they did
Totally.
the right things. So I think a lot of people fell on the sword of, blaming, hey, the weather or the economy.
Yeah.
But we're here to actually say there's people that are murdering it this year that are actually up revenue wise. It's just not the
Yeah.
bulk of the listings. Like we saw in COVID, everybody was crushing it. It's the, 20% rule, the 80-20 principle. The top 20% are going to do 80% of the business. So just to get
Mhm.
ahead of that, it's like all these markets in New England, they're still investable. It's not like we saw all this new inventory. It might feel like that, but it's also the psychology of like, you go to buy a brand new car at Tesla and then you start seeing Teslas everywhere, right? If you get that in your head of like, oh, there's all these new listings, you're going to start thinking there's new listings. So it's still investable in the Northeast. You just got to be doing the right stuff. And we've seen a lot of people start talking about that in the last quarter. So I wanted to definitely touch on that.
Totally.
On the sale, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, and what I was gonna say is the folks that are feeling the biggest pinch, um, when money is tight, you're gonna feel a pinch no matter what. And the biggest difference between short-term and long-term rental is, long-term rentals that I own, when we kicked things off, we had about 3, 4, maybe 5 months of mortgage payments and reserves. That was really all we needed. We knew it wouldn't take that long to go find a long-term rental tenant, and then they're pretty much locked in for a year. And of course, there's risk in that. They might not leave, they might stop paying. Put that aside for a second. In short-term rental, I really think it's smart to have like a good 6 months of like operating expenses in the piggy bank. Not that you're gonna go 6 months without income, but you may be supplementing that revenue for a little bit as you start to get going, right? Or if you do end up having a down, like a shorter ski season like we had this year, mind you, last year global warming was still an issue and ski season went until May. So like let's not think that ski
Calm
season's
down,
gonna.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same exact situation, right? So unfortunately, it's just warmer this year. It's raining more. It's mud season has started early. Still skiing. You and I are going skiing this weekend. It's going to be great. But
And it's
what I
also
will
an
say,
election year, which nobody's talking
true.
about, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a big deal economically.
totally. It absolutely is. So I do find like if you're getting into investing, don't go at this with no reserves. Have a healthy piggy bank of reserves. You never know when you might need to deploy that. Or let's say you are covering your costs and you start making some good headway on that. Use some of that money to reinvest into some new amenities or new ideas that's going to be a trendsetter in the market. Don't just follow what everyone else is doing. Be the first one to it. So just some ideas, just some food for thought. You know, it was really easy during COVID, obviously, to go buy a house, have 1 or 2 months of reserves, or have no reserves, but close on the 1st of the month and know you had 2 months before a mortgage payment and to be perfectly
Right.
fine. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, interest rates are higher, but don't expect to get more out of your house with just a fancy pricing strategy if you buy a quote unquote turnkey house and then don't do anything to it. It's not realistic. So,
Right. Hit the nail on the head. On the sales side, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of change going on right now. Inventory is still incredibly low, like shockingly low. We look at trends before COVID, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and now, and we haven't seen an uptick in inventory at all. It can certainly feel like that. People think there's all these houses on the market. Like in the Newry Bethel market, for instance, like four got listed in a week, and everybody thinks, "Oh my God, there's this surplus of inventory." Right now, I'm
yeah,
seeing in pretty much every market except Vermont for some reason, uh, people are pricing really high and things are sitting. Things are flying in Vermont. I don't really understand why. Maybe it's just much more savvy sellers. It's a much smaller market, but in Maine and New Hampshire, people are pricing up here and they're just playing the game of just getting hit down
totally.
versus the most successful sellers. They're pricing it right. It's going under contract quickly. So we definitely still have an inventory problem. Interest rates are
Mhm.
still right around 7%. So we're not, likely to see these massive rate cuts that we were expecting earlier in the year. We're maybe expecting one, maybe one
Right.
or two, which would be great. But people are getting a lot more creative right now in the market from what I'm seeing much busier Q1 than I had last year personally. And a lot of people are locking down new construction that will close in the
Yeah.
summer with seller concessions. And I'm just
Yes.
finding that a local legend in the Bethel area, Gary Williamson, always tells me he's like, these new houses are going to
Gary.
kick everyone's rear end because why would you just buy an old house that's been beat to crap, right? So a lot of these new construction, you're beating price, you're getting value, you're getting seller concession, and then on the short-term rental side, you're getting a product that people want. Kenny Bedwell always says new construction oftentimes has the highest, gross ROI because
Right.
people want something that's new and not messed up. I mean, I've booked a lot of Airbnbs that look great in photos and they're just beat to crap. So I'd probably go new construction the next time I go on vacation. I'm not sure what you're seeing
Right.
on the management side after they close, but that's definitely a trend I'm seeing right now.
With the new construction, so long as it's a good constructor.
Bingo. Yep.
Every now and then you do like Gary's an old timer Mainer, like the houses he builds, I manage one of them right now. No problems. It's a
Great quality.
breeze, which is so appreciated. Other houses, you do have to vet your builders. Sometimes a new house can have a lot more problems if it wasn't done right than one that's 5 or 6 years old, where maybe those problems are all sorted out at this point. So, but that's not a short-term rental comment. That's just whenever you're buying a house, get an inspection, figure out how to use things and know what you're getting into. One thing that's kind of interesting, this isn't so much a state of the market, but just an observation, is I do know a lot of folks are getting into the short-term rental game, and maybe they've never owned a house before. Maybe they rent an apartment or they rent a home, or they have a lifestyle where they travel a lot and just have never owned a home.
Or own a condo in a city with no parking. That's a very common one too
Right.
that I run
Yeah.
into, where they don't have access to a water heater. What's that? It
Right.
comes on.
Yeah. So what I think is really important for folks starting to get into the short-term rental game, because we do see this a lot, and real estate is always an amazing investment, even if you haven't owned a primary residence yet. Get some education on what it takes to run a home. The amount of times that people just think a home is like this machine that self-heals and doesn't need maintenance, it blows my mind. And there are things that have to be done to a home annually, sometimes monthly, in order to keep it in good working order. And that's just an important home buying tip, but it's on steroids when you have short-term rentals. And in some ways, it's actually better for the home because the home's getting deep cleaned, at least once a week on average, with people in there to inform you when something breaks. There's nothing worse than having something broken you don't find out until 2 months later when you show up at your home, and it can be kind of serious sometimes. So I just another piece of advice. I know that on the management side, we've run into certain issues where somebody might not have been a homeowner before, and then it seems obvious for me to remind them to get their furnace service, to get their septic pump, to get, hot water. If it's a on-demand hot water heater, getting that serviced, it's like totally out of left field and some expense they didn't plan for, and that's an issue. And that just goes back to having money in the bank before you buy a property. And I think what we're trying to say is that make sure, A, that you have money to buy a home and weather any kind of storm, and B, if you're gonna do it, you know? Go all in on your furnishings, go all in on your design, but don't, always just make sure that your actions and your expectations are in alignment with each other, and I think that goes for any market, right? Of course, you're going to need education to dial in your pricing strategy, your amenity strategy, your length of stay strategy. And then you're going to want to have a 2, 3, 4. And I usually like to have a 5-year game plan of continued things that you may do to the home. So I say this as a cautionary tale because I think now people have had a full spectrum. And yeah, there are people that bought in each of our markets, all of our markets, 6 months ago, and now they want out. And the reasons they want out are things that were told to them in the beginning. They're sometimes there's just some shiny object happening. You never know, but I'll kind of
Yeah, and
have
my
to leave it
wheels are
there.
turning because you said something that reminded me. A lot of the homes that are actually on the market now were purchased in the last 3 years when people were waiving home inspections. So I'd say the last
Hmm.
5 home inspections I've done, just in the past 30 days have all had problems that could have been addressed when they purchased it, but we were in a crazy
Yeah,
market and people were waiving inspections. Radon water mitigation systems not working, where there's radon in the water, radon air.
hmm.
We had a generator almost catch fire at the inspection because it hadn't been serviced in 3 years,
Oh,
and the muffler insulation was dislodged. Leaks in the
no
ceiling.
kidding.
So when you're this is all the $900,000 house, caught on
Yeah,
our client's inspection, but a lot of this stuff wasn't ever uh, found on inspection. It was never maintained. So the biggest thing I'm seeing right now in the market, in all the markets, I'm in New England where we have hard winters and we've got great summers, but these houses get really used and abused. Specifically, New Hampshire and Maine, a lot of deferred maintenance that is just going over
totally.
people's heads, and they're pricing it where it's a perfect house because they don't really know that you really got to stain a ski house every 4 or 5 years. You really need to maintain the
Right.
boiler every year. You got to pump the septic. And there's just not a lot of education around that. So it's now be more careful than ever about these problems and make sure you have a qualified home inspector because it's really not
Mhm.
hard to become a home inspector. We're finding a lot of challenges with these properties that are coming up as resale. Specifically in the last quarter, I've seen that in the uptick in inventory. A lot of these houses were sold in 2019, 20, and 21.
Totally, totally. So, I think what we're trying to say is as you head into the next 9 months and want to get in the short-term rental game, make sure you're well qualified from a lending perspective. Don't necessarily go maxing out what your spending ability is. Don't be
Bingo.
scared to bring in, don't be scared to bring in a partner too. Maybe someone that has some additional capital just to give you that buffer. There's nothing wrong with taking that approach. This doesn't have to be all you, right? And then I'd also say just know, so make smart decisions. Know your guest avatar and fall in love with being able to try to service that type of guest. It doesn't have to be some mansion with 10 bedrooms and a tricked out design and amenities. It could be a home that literally just sleeps 4 or 5 people. That's okay. But if you're gonna do it, do it. Don't act like guests are an inconvenience to you in being in your home, and don't act like don't act like them being there is the biggest privilege to them on the world, right? There's a lot of different homes that they can go rent or hotels that they can go rent. Give them a great experience, put yourself in their shoes, and deliver with hospitality first if you're gonna be in short-term rentals. And if you do that, you will be just fine, I promise you.
Yeah, my last call, literally right before this, the gentleman asked me, we were talking about New Hampshire, and he says, "All right, what's the best bedroom count in this market?" I just said, it's just like when people ask, "What's the cost per square foot for new construction?" It's like, well, I don't know. It's all about buying the right property, the right place with the right amenities. I've got a one bedroom that crushes it, and it could outperform a lot of three bedrooms in the market. Or my lake house is two bed, and I bet I'll kick the rear of the four beds on the lake just because I'm a better host. So now more
Right.
than ever, I've seen consumers more educated when they come to me and continuing to educate themselves. And we spoke about coaching last time and consulting. Now more than ever, the information's out there and you can get access to it. It's work with a great realtor that can navigate the market on the short-term rental side and just the real estate side and has the connections. I think there's more value than ever in having a fiduciary buyer agent and educate yourself because mistakes can happen in these changing markets when sellers still think the market's here, buyers think we're in 2008, and agents are like, what's going on? So just get ready, go all in, and know exactly what it's going to take to succeed in the market. And don't just take the agent's word for it. Bill Faith and Kenny Bedwell did a podcast, and they're like, do not trust your agent. It's pretty funny. They did shout me out, which was cool. But yeah,
Nice.
do some research on your own and be equipped for today's real estate market because there's awesome deals happening every single week. But it's the
Yeah,
people that are showing up and they're not afraid to level up to get those deals.
I love it. Will, someone wants to buy a house, how can they reach you?
Yeah, easy guy to reach. You can send me a text 207-232-8877. My website, willvanwickler.com, or on Facebook, licensed in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Can help you out really any of the good markets in New England except Cape Cod. Dave can help you out there. But somebody wants to reach out for management or consulting after they work with me, how can they
Yeah,
reach out to you?
absolutely. Our website, 5sdrcohost.com. You can also hit me up on Facebook, Dave Menapace, or on Instagram, Dave_Menapace. So find me there. Let's connect. Let's help you out. Let's help you achieve your goals.
Awesome. Well,
All right.
good to see you, Dave, and
Boom.
I'll catch you on the slopes tomorrow. See you, everybody.
You got it. Bye.